So here I'm back again. Yeah. I been cruising and doing a little ear hustling in the YouTube streets and had like lot of things that was like coming to my mind while I was watching all this stuff. And a lot of things was like it was all in sections what I was thinking about cuz like this whole political thing which has caused me to want to do this show. Make American anti-intellectualism die already, right? Like, please, it's like it's completely embarrassing, and I find it just I love laws of attraction because what you focus on is what you become conscious of. So you become more and more and more and more conscious of the very thing that you focus on, right? And when I sat here and I was looking at the news and how the Mexican president put up a simple presentation, like a very simple presentation, and was like, this is who named the Gulf of Mexico, the UN, and she went into the 1600s. Like she just pulled out gave a whole history lesson. And then she's a water sign. She's a Cancer. So she touched everybody with, well, look at this fucking fentanyl situation. People looking like zombies and shit on that fucking zombie drug. Because I remember that video clip. Like, look at this situation in America, and I don't want this here in Mexico. You see what I'm saying? And I was like, okay, I like the way she did that. But it was like, it was simple. You get what I'm saying? Because that's how people walk you into a debate. People walk you into what it is that they're trying to convey. I remember it was a debate between Polite and the Hebrew Israelites. And Polite was doing the Leo thing and all excited and this and that and saying this and that and da da da, because I remember Polite was in his Saturn return. And the Hebrew Israelite guy, he reminded me of my cousin Man, because my cousin Man is a Scorpio. And I remember Sinetta, who's an Aries, was telling him, he was like, yo, you better be prepared. Them Hebrew Israelites is sharp. They sharp. You know what I'm saying? They're well studied because it's a jailhouse religion. They got time, right? But he wasn't trying to listen. And anyway, when the Hebrew Israelite guy got up there, he said, y'all just believe anything this nigga say. God damn. And then he was just very calm, very mature. And he said that he pointed out the way that Polite's wives and the girls were dressed. It was like, this is the reason our daughters are getting molested. Now, that's not true. Because we all know that it has nothing to do with what a woman wears to why she's being molested. Do I think that the style and clothes in which a young girl has on is not okay? Yes, as somebody from the city, and I can tell you, no, it's not okay. You know what I'm saying? Because the problem is the males. It ain't her that's the problem. It's them that's the problem. You feel what I'm saying? So he began to go into the statistics of how much the young girls are molested. Now, someone is me, I would have dragged that topic. Just like, pretty much, if you just take it over to the side, because I wouldn't debate nobody. I don't care to. But if you take it over to the divestment topic, the divestors will argue like, yeah, 60 to motherfucking, I say 90% of us are being molested before the age of 18 as black women in America. See what I'm saying? So the point is, it is the emotional touch that happens when the debate starts. Somebody's gonna, your son's in jail, or they're gonna touch something, right, to kind of, get you going, to kind of get you riled up, to kind of get your emotions fucked up. You know what I mean? That's how there's an artistry to that level of a manipulation, because that's what it is. It's all manipulation. And so I watched this and I watched how she did that, and I was like, yeah, you know, yeah, you can get into fitness and you can get into things, but we can get into things over there too. But that wasn't the point. I just liked the way she did it. And then she slammed him because she showed that you don't even have simple American history, his simple history lessons that you know. See what I'm saying? Now, anyway, I have been creating playlists, and I've been separating the playlists. Like, I've been making some very intense playlists. They're not public yet, but they will be. And these playlists I've created, I've been separating them. Smarter by, knowing how to read, right? How to read. Smarter by articulation and public speaking and articulation. Notes on whatever the divestment or whatever, or notes on it, and whatever it might be notes on. Maybe it's who knows, on science or quantum leaping or something like that. So I had like these playlists that I'm breaking down, like I'm breaking them apart through categories, right? And as I was doing this, I came across the video I'm going to present to y'all in a minute, about the anti-intellectualism of America and how people are not reading, how there are people who cannot even read and they're in college right now. And I was like, whoa, I got to talk about this. I know I went away, but here I am. I got to talk about this because you have to understand, at 40 years old, to have accomplished the things I have accomplished for myself, to have done all the things that I have done, to have watched other people follow the way behind me or with me or whatever, and to see them just kind of fade away, and just like, where's all these people go? You get broken down in this country for being smart. You get broken down for deciding to get on a microphone and read a fucking book. You get broken down for taking the time to go to libraries and study and write and blog and share. And because, honestly, when I started blogging, that was me practicing my writing. That I've always been a writer. I'm a writer. So that was me to practice my writing, my speaking, because this is all the things I did behind the scenes. I even took a little course from this lady named Robin something. I even spoke to her directly. And I took her course about on speaking and this and that, and it really helped me. Okay, and that's why I speak the way I speak now. And I still feel like I need to expand my vocabulary. I was expanding my vocabulary then, and now I feel like I need to expand my vocabulary and do the things and articulate my words better and learn how to gather my thoughts in a more cohesive way. These are things that's important to me, right? And I thought about how I allowed my life to just be distracted, how emotionally broken down I became, and all these things from like that mid-30s and the celibacy and everything. And one thing I realized, and I'm very proud of myself, is that I had come to see that I'm smarter than I have ever given myself credit for. And I'm not weak. I'm cautious and I'm careful. And I'm highly intuitive. And I can sense when something is just not right with a motherfucker. And they're not worth it. You get what I'm saying? And so that has made me feel weak, especially going up in a concrete jungle where everybody fights and everybody goes crazy. But that is not good for your mental health either. You feel me? Because even if I took these experiences and I gave it another experience, or I did something different in these different times, it just didn't feel like it was going to be a good result. Because these were people that put me in a place of pure stupidity. People who have pulled me into a place of pure dumbness. And that is where my anger and my rage has been. And honestly, once I started to discover this, my anger started to simmer down a little bit more. I started to realize now where my anger was coming from since the age of my 20s. Like, why? Like, now I understand it. I remember my psychiatrist was like, "You don't understand why you angry." She looked at me and said, "You don't understand why you angry." And I had to sit down with that. And I remember her telling me, "You still young. Don't worry about relationships. You still young." And I get what she was saying. I hate that she retired, but I get what she was telling me. And the thing is, with this experience as a whole, right? As a whole, um, I'm proud of myself on so many levels because now I have come to see. Because I did see it then. I'm not going to hold you. When I was like 34, 35, I was like, man, I can't even put myself into this app no more. Because, like, I was getting paid to be on this app. And I was like, because, man, being an intelligent woman ain't it, man. Being smart ain't it, man. People don't appreciate you being smart, man. And then when you smart, man, people hate you for being smart. People hate you for being smart. That's crazy. Especially when you just living life and you just like, hey, I just read this book and I just want to talk about it, and I learned this from this book, and I sat down and I wrote about this, and people hate you for that. That's crazy. So I had to realize and come to the point realizing that America is truly an anti-intellectualism place to be. And it took Miss Cancer Mexico, to show this shit. To show that this place does not appreciate intellectualism, critical thinking, people sharing their different thoughts in our studies and analysis of whatever it may be. And so then I came across this video here as I cook my food in the kitchen. I'm making vegetable lasagna. I'm definitely going to be indulging in that. I cooked that early. You see the time? It's 3:50 Eastern Standard Time, PM. And so, yeah. I'm going to go ahead and play this, but I'm going to talk over it. I'm going to make comments and stuff because this is fair use, Article 107. This is for the purpose of sharing, education, for the purpose of criticism, and yeah, all that stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and, did I have something else to say? I just go ahead. We're going to just go ahead and get into this share. This is from someone else's channel, in human form dash psychology. Okay. So I don't know if this person is an actual psychologist or not. I didn't get that deep into them, but we're going to go ahead and play this video. Let's go. Again, I'm going to talk over this video as it plays.
I've heard countless conversations about many different social issues that impact every one of us, some more trivial than others. But one topic has emerged that has caused many disagreements among people who, in the past, may have never disagreed with one another before.
Right.
Do you harass your clients when they're at your restaurant to put on masks? Do you harass them?
All lives matter. My life matters. What do they want me to drop dead wearing a goddamn mask?
Epistemology, the study of knowledge, truth, and its limits, has been a debated subject since ancient times. But in present day, it's almost as if we've never had to have these conversations until now. This is a problem because suddenly, overnight, we've become acutely aware of the uncertainty that we face. And despite this reality, no one seems to be able to agree on anything. In this video, we're going to take a look at the consequences of anti-intellectualism in American culture and why this type of thinking occurs. Hello everyone, I'm in human form. If you enjoy videos about social psychology and want to help support a smaller YouTube channel, be sure to hit subscribe and like this video.
I definitely think you should support this person's channel.
Anti-intellectualism can be described as the systematic denigration of science-based facts and the pursuit of theory and knowledge.
We need to write that down. The systematic denigration of science and facts. I like that. The systematic denigration of science and facts.
The foundation of this bias was first explored in American historian Richard Hofstadter's seminal book, Anti-Intellectualism in American Life, published in 1963.
Wow.
The 1950s witch hunts against intellectual.
1963. So this goes to show me, again, this is going to be an interrupted video, y'all, because this is, I'm not trying to get copyright infringed. So this shows me that I'm not alone, okay? It feels good to know that you're not alone. And we're never really alone, ever. But it just feels good to know that somebody wrote this book in 1960 motherfucking 3. Okay, this is before all the social media shit. And look, just listen.
And artists during the McCarthy era left a strong impression on Hofstadter's thinking. His and others' studies into anti-intellectualism provide insight into how the concept has intertwined itself with American culture.
Right.
The concept is difficult to define in a concrete manner because it manifests itself in different ways depending on the circumstances, a handful of which are explored in this video. One of the more common ways this appears in our lives is when someone dismisses intellectual interests as a waste of time, while claiming that conventional wisdom is a superior method of thought.
What are you going to school for that for? How much money are you going to make? Why are you taking that course? What's the purpose? Do you know when you get a certification, you know the definition of a certification? It means that you are a certified professional in or whatever that is that you took a study in. So I am a certified office administrator. Okay? I could become a certified what is that called? A quality and it's Q&A. I forgot what the A means, okay? But I could be certified in that. I'm taking a course in that too, meaning that I can sit down and I have the skills, and I took the course to have the skills to look at the product, to say if it is quality and if it can be authorized to go past, to be shipped out. These things matter because skills matter. You can become a certified bartender.
It can be seen everywhere, in business, politics, religion, education, and deceptively, within the way we think. Despite the fact that it's often associated with America's current ideological right and religious followers, progressives and liberals have also wielded anti-intellectualism to protect their own political power as well. We'll take a deeper look into these modern examples a little later in this video. In 1991, sociologist Daniel Rigney expanded Richard Hofstadter's theory by distinguishing the 3 ways in which anti-intellectualism appears. I'm going to try and explain these with examples that apply to the 2020s to provide a clearer image of what this looks like. The first type is unreflective instrumentalism, meaning a belief that the pursuit of theory and knowledge is unnecessary unless it can be wielded for practical means. This is kind of like when you ask your friend who's obsessive about hustling and grinding on Uber if he or she has thought about studying economics, and they respond with, "Nah bro, that's bookworm shit. I'm here to make money." Followed by religious anti-rationalism, which is characterized as someone who rejects reason, logic, and facts in favor of reactive decision-making based on gut feelings, morals, or religious absolutes. The modern creationist movement, which denies evidence of evolution, would be an example of this type. And finally, populist anti-elitism, which is the rejection of elite institutions, as well as those categorized within the social or intellectual elite. For instance, someone who belittles college professors or discredits scientists and researchers without any reason to. Hofstadter describes intelligence as utilizing ideas in a practical way, while intellect is about developing, challenging, and evolving the ideas themselves. Because of this, anti-intellectual thought is used as a weapon to keep an iron grip on the ideas and systems that protect groups or individuals with power and privilege. This can appear in the form of misinformation, which gives the illusion that it's providing alternative information that is being kept from the viewer, when in reality, by perpetuating incorrect information, it benefits the people in power. The conservative YouTube channel PragerU falls under this description.
But when I hear somebody somberly intone, science
Oh,
says,
boy.
or follow the science.
Hold on, y'all.
Tactics are more frequently observed within dominant ideology.
Oh, okay, that was a
These
part of the video. I thought that was a
I
commercial,
hear
y'all.
somebody somberly intone, science says, or follow the science. I get very nervous.
These anti-intellectual tactics are more frequently observed within dominant ideologies in the
Right. Yeah. That I'm glad he said that. Like, people be like, oh, you get all your information on YouTube and you listen to look at blogs, and it's like, if America is a water sign, the way that people are gonna always try to fuck with you is through ignorant ass manipulation. Because manipulation could be ignorant as fuck. Let's not make it seem like there's always intelligence to fucking manipulation. There's some very ignorant manipulating motherfuckers too. Okay? So, like what he said, when I hear Simon says, or when science says, or when I get nervous, you get nervous. That's you. When I hear it, I listen. And then I decide for my own fucking brain if I agree with it or not. I once had someone say to me, oh, because sometimes people use shit like when you use a word a lot, they go, oh, I hate that word. Well, you're going to keep hating it because I'm going to keep using it. So you have people that do shit like that. Like, I remember I would say perception a lot, and the lady was like, oh, I hate when people say perception. Well, why would you hate the word perception when everything is about a perception? When you go and there's a crime committed, there's a perception of the lady across the street. There's a perception of the person in the bench. There's a perception of the two people who the crime is involved in. There's a perception of the witness that nobody's seen. Shit, there's a perception of someone who may heard it from when they was on the bus. There's a perception of the person that was getting on the bus when the crime was committed, getting off the bus when the crime was committed, or on the bus. What do you mean you hate the word perception? And that is the thing about logic. And that's why logical people have to stay focused on the logic and not the emotions. Because that is how people get you in debates and arguments. They'll try to personally attack you. Why do you think people dox people? What do you think that is? It's a breakdown tactic. I'm going to break you down. I'm going to tell you who your mama, your daddy, and everybody is, and where you live, and this, that, and the third. I'm going to break you down. I'm going to show people what you look like because you hide your face. And, oh, I'm going to pull up some old videos of you and this and that, and I'm going to tell you what somebody told you about this and that to try to break you down. To try to say, well, if you were so smart, then why do you live like this? And why do you have this and that? And that's not the fucking point. Because that's a neurotypical way of trying to, they can't reach you there. So the way they reach you there is they try to attack you. Let me tell you something. That dude that has a whole channel that goes against Divested Zealous channel, right? This is the best example I could pull right now. He keeps saying this woman's name is Divested Zealot. I understand you have an accent, but you can still say zealot. Zealot with your Caribbean accent, okay? That's not the woman's name. You sit here and you show her what cum on her face. It's not even her, but supposed to be her with cum on her face. You sit here and you call her demons and devils and all this kind of shit. That's not a logical argument, sir. Okay? That's not a logical argument. If you're going to take, and I'm using this because this person got a whole channel dedicated to responding to this person's channel. That's not an argument. I don't care what she does in her private bedroom. Okay? Whether she talks about it or not, I don't care about that. When I go listen to it, whether they fuck with me or not, I like to hear their logic. I like to hear what is being discussed on the panel. Is that not the purpose? So if you disagree with what's being discussed on the panel, focus the conversation on what's being discussed on the panel. Sometimes people talk shit. I talk shit. I think they all fat. And I stand on that. Okay? But that ain't important, right? Here's the thing. He sits here and he goes in on her channel. Again, I'm going to talk a lot. I'm just going to let y'all know over this video because I'm not getting copyright infringed. So he sits here and he does all this, not focusing on the logical debate, actually proving to her what she says about who he is, which is a nignog, and especially an Allen nignog and a cross seas nignog. They all dusty. And he's doing dusty behavior once again, proving her right without her having to say nothing.
The US, but they can appear in any group, identity, or ideology.
Absolutely.
And to limit this complicated concept to one demographic would be an oversimplification, as we will see. Hofstadter points out that although its form may change from one circumstance to another, anti-intellectualism is fundamentally American. When European colonists first arrived onto the shores of North America, they brought with them Puritan and Protestant evangelical beliefs, which have been a force in shaping American culture to this day. The Founding Fathers were greatly influenced by the...
America was created by I don't want to use the word losers, but we have to call it for what it is. Rebellious people and losers. This is what America, this is the history of what America is. I'm not talking about the indigenous ones that were here first. Unfortunately, unless we go into the history books, we'll know what they did in those times. But until then, we're going to go by what we know in these times. And that is that America was started by motherfucking rebellious motherfuckers and losers from their other countries. Males.
These beliefs, and exerted this influence onto their ideals of freedom in what they called the New World. Benjamin Franklin and George Washington embraced the masculine ideal of the rugged, self-made man that could come to America with nothing, and through hard work and some backbone, could become a wealthy industrialist. No education was necessary for this ideal man, for he was self-made by contrast to educated intellectuals, which were considered as effeminate and powerless. Intellectuals were considered to lack faith, vigor, and moral virtue, all of which to the anti-intellectual was considered an essential part of religion and business ownership. Even Thomas Jefferson was mocked for his intellect by Federalist leaders, claiming that he was unfit for presidential and military duties upon election. The English Puritans that colonized New England had a deep scholarly tradition, a tradition that led to the founding of Ivy League schools like Harvard and Yale, who are still considered prestigious universities to this day. But the establishment of universities intensified suspicions and distrust in intellect, as working-class individuals and intellectuals were driven further apart. The sentiment among some was that scholars hid behind books and ivory towers and didn't produce anything useful for society. At a certain point in the 1800s, there was a dramatic shift towards religious enthusiasm, which divided certain religious groups. Religious faith became more individualistic and no longer bound to institutional authority. And with this, the Puritan ideal of the minister as an intellectual and educational leader was steadily weakened. Anti-education and anti-elite rhetoric was emerging in many institutionalized evangelical settings across the country. Dwight Moody,
This is why it is very important. I was muted earlier. I don't know if y'all heard what I said before about America was built off of losers and rebellious motherfuckers that they couldn't do what they want to do in their country, so they came to America to do it. Listen, this is why history being taught is very important. This is why reading history and knowing history is important. I understand why a lot of these scholars they advocate, especially Robert Greene, that you should read history. I'm really starting to come to realize how important that is. As I write more, as I elevate myself more as a writer again, I'm always doing that, but as I do it again, as I elevate myself as a public speaker or just any type of public speaking platform, it is important to know history. Because literally, is this not history repeating itself? A history that has been going on for years. But this goes to show this is a part of human nature. This is why I need to read that book. This is all a part of what human nature is.
American evangelist during this time was famously quoted saying, "I do not read any book unless it will help me understand the Bible." This was the first major success of anti-intellectualism in the United States, and would proliferate religious anti-rationalism in various religious groups over the course of the next 200 years. Mobility of the population, education, and the development of radical ideas made it increasingly difficult for religious fundamentalists to remain separate from secular academic thought in the 20th century. Provided that secular intellectualism remained associated with elites, fundamentalists could either look the other way or take advantage of it by making it the target of a militant sermon. But the gap separating religiosity and academic belief was closing, and many individuals were seeing religion as less desirable. The efficiency movement in the early 1900s sparked changes in the government and the economy to cut down on inefficiency and waste. This would be done by appointing experts who could identify problems and wasteful standards in various domains and solve them. Although the practice was necessary and beneficial to all, it reinforced differences between expert intellectual types and the common laborer. By the 1960s, this divide between intellectual thinking and conventional wisdom had evolved into a culture war that would appear in many forms, with anti-intellectuals opposing new developments in society. The civil rights movement, women's liberation, and anti-war sentiment were all rejected and trivialized by anti-intellectual types who criticized the ideas as being antithetical to American patriotism, a narrow-minded and intolerant belief that remains widely held today, as you will see in our next section.
Here we go.
Can you tell me again how a CBT Nugget
And
subscription
this is on
saves
purpose.
me money?
Your subscription gives you access to our entire
This
library.
this is all on purpose, y'all. This is what I want y'all to understand too. It's on purpose that no one really wants you to be smart. No one really wants you to have true knowledge and even love. Here's another thing. Love. Nobody, I'm starting to grow to understand that even to have self-love and boundaries is intelligent. To be conscious of yourself, to be in tune with your, like truly in tune with yourself and work on your body and your mind and your spirit is intelligent in itself. To want to have financial stability is intelligence. To want to be financially abundant is intelligence. It's intelligent to want to continue to be intelligent and read and learn and do things and elevate yourself and elevate your life. What is all these books with all these things here for? What did we go to school for? That's intelligence. Okay? So I'm gonna get into the meat and bones of this motherfucking shit right here. Excuse me, y'all. I'm trying to not be so vulgar on the microphone, but I can't help it. But man, let's get to it.
An anti-intellectual mindset can occur as a symptom of otherwise ineffective strategies people use to process information. When a person is presented complex information at a high volume, their thinking will fall back on rules of thumb called heuristics to make decisions.
Right.
For example, people tend to pay close attention to information that is familiar to them and unopposed to what they already know. Psychologists call this phenomenon confirmation bias. It is shockingly
Before we get to confirmation bias, let me say something. This is why in any book of success, the first rule of thumb they tell you is to what? Challenge yourself.
Difficult to overcome. Social pressure and the desire to get along with members of a group can also impact their decision making. Social pressure in combination with fear is an especially potent factor in distorting a person's ability to process information and make the right decisions.
Right.
When someone who understands these biases takes advantage of them, we can see how anti-intellectual thought can spread at an incredible rate. In this section, we will look at how power takes advantage of anti-intellectual belief.
Oh boy, commercial coming.
If we ignore that science and sort of put our head in the sand and think it's all about vegetation management.
I want y'all to listen to this part. I want y'all to really, this part right here blew me because I didn't see this. But listen.
Power takes advantage of anti-intellectual belief.
Yes.
If we ignore that science and sort of put our head in the sand and think it's all about vegetation management, we're not going to succeed together protecting Californians.
Okay, it'll start getting cooler.
I wish
You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Well, I don't think science knows, actually.
America has had a long relationship with anti-intellectualism.
Let's go back to that. This reminds me of a Key and Peele skit. I will have to find it. It just hit me now. God damn it, y'all. There's a Key and Peele skit. And in the Key and Peele skit, the guy, yes, love is intelligence. I've come to that realization. It's intelligent to have love for yourself. And it's intelligent to know who and what is worthy of you loving them and them loving you. Yes. So Key and Peele had a skit where the guy is talking about things like what this guy is talking about. And so the guy, the other guy in the group goes, it's like four of them, and the guy goes, awkward. And he looks around at everybody, he goes, awkward. And so as he keeps talking, I kept doing that and laughing and trying to make him feel stupid. So eventually he confronts him and tells him about his own insecurities and why he's looking around at everybody else, and told him to stop looking around and look at me when I'm talking to you. And the guy just couldn't stop looking around. But you have to check out that skit, okay, by Key and Peele. And the point of it was just this very moment with Donald Trump. Here it is, because of this position that this man holds. And this person is talking about something that is very important. I found the book that I put on my book list. It talks about, it says what your food eats. So it's not just about the food you eat, but the book tells you what the food you eat and what the food you eat also eats. And I was like, oh, I need to definitely read this book, because this is going to give me the answers I need, because the book also gets into how nutrition in the food is lost. Because I remember a time we used to just be full off of eating, and now it's like, it ain't like that. And I honestly think it's worse up north, because I have found myself eating food up there and then I'm hungry again. Unless I ate something that was like, no, I can't even say it was them. Can't even say it was that. But let's go.
Ignore that science and sort of put our head in the sand and think it's all about vegetation management, we're not going to succeed together protecting Californians.
Okay. It'll start getting...
I don't know what he was talking about, but he said it's not just about vegetation management. There's other things that we need to look at and da-da-da-da, because we do need to take care of the earth, people. There are earth doctors out here. It is important to have people that care about the earth, to take care of it, to make sure the trees are still here, to make sure that the vegetation in the earth and the ground is how do we not? See, this is what I'm talking about, intelligence. This is the fucked up part about this fucking patriarch, bro. But I'm not even getting into that part. But like, how do we not think about these things? What I bet you your bottom dollar, in the words of Raymond, your bottom dollar, that if anybody goes out there to California to see how those fires got started, it's going to have to do something with the earth and nature and heat, the trees. It's going to have to do something with something to why these fires, because they said the fire just got started. Oh, is that the picture? I just caught on to it. That's a picture of a fire. Oh, maybe I just answered my own question.
Cooler. You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
It's going to get cooler.
Well, I don't think science knows.
I don't think science knows. How science don't know? How science don't know? But anyway, let's keep going, bro. I just want that part. This shit blew me, all right?
America has had a long relationship with anti-intellectualism, ingrained deep within its core beliefs and principles. These old systems of belief are what has shaped the societal structures we live in today. The politicians, massive corporations, and religious institutions that dominate so many aspects of our lives benefit from this the most. Anti-intellectualism is the weapon of choice when they seek to tighten their grip around the neck of society. Politicians have realized that anti-intellectualism is very successful in charming certain demographics into voting for a candidate or policy. This manipulative psychological tactic was popularized by Dwight Eisenhower during his presidential campaign when he described intellectuals as, quote, men who take more words than necessary to tell more than they know. He was quick to criticize intellectuals as failed businessmen, despite the fact that he himself had previously served as president of Columbia University, and his father was a college-educated engineer. This was all a careful performance to persuade the common person by reinforcing the perceived threat of a supposed intellectual class, creating a division in the minds of the population, no different than the propaganda tactics used by totalitarian governments in Soviet Russia and Germany in the 20th century. Certainly, this was not the first time a politician voiced anti-intellectual sentiments, but from then on is how American right-wing politicians would communicate with their conservative followers. Every Republican candidate's campaign from Nixon to Trump would follow the narrative of the strong leader who is characterized by conventional wisdom that need not rely on experts or stuffy academics. George W. Bush often posed as a rugged cowboy for photo ops to come across as some sort of hyper-real political John Wayne figure, ready to lasso up some oil from the Middle East. He didn't need no scientists telling him what to do. But more recently, the consequences of politically driven anti-intellectual thought can be seen with the Trump administration's response to the coronavirus pandemic. The administration repeatedly undermined government scientists' suggestions in dealing with the pandemic, leading to a new wave of anti-elitism in America. Democratic presidents are also guilty of using anti-intellectualism as a political tool for their benefit. President Lyndon B. Johnson also engaged in anti-intellectual posturing of this sort. He would make mention of his working-class upbringing in rural central Texas, and in the same breath, claim that intellectuals are, quote, more interested in the superficial than they are with the things that have really built America.
This is what I hate about shit. It does this bullshit.
This manner in which politicians speak seems completely normal to us.
See,
Repeatedly using patronizing language such as folks or regular
Yes.
people.
Understand that the history, okay? This is why history is important to learn. History of journalism is drama, is yellow journalism. The purpose of journalism in the 1800s was for the point to start drama and disarray. When you are a blogger, okay, when you work for a newspaper, magazine, like mainly, I'm talking about the newspaper because my journalism, work for a newspaper and all this kind of stuff, or you mainly when you work for them, you're still a part of journalism. But the thing is, when you're like a blogger, you are a citizen journalist. That means that if I go out here, like I would blog about and write about the places I went to in my neighborhood and the restaurants and give them reviews, or I go out here and I read books and I give book reviews, you're a citizen journalist, right? So that's just your style of journalism, right? That's why blogging and all this stuff had came out, because that's what it is. Now, and journalism, its whole purpose was to cause disarray. So think about that. The magazine is different. The magazine been here since the 1600s. It was to appeal to women. It was nothing but a bunch of ads and pictures that was advertising to women. That's why to this day, the top magazines all what? Advertise to women. Again, this is why it's important to read history.
Referring to rural populations, has a real effect on that demographic self-image and perceived sense of control over their own
it's doing that
communities.
bullshit.
They then believe that their only hope is to be subservient to the politicians that supposedly represent them. This occurrence, which started as a valid criticism of wealthy elites, has become a powerful political tool used to politicize fundamentally non-partisan issues. But many of you may consider our next example as far more nefarious than the divisive behavior of politicians.
Right. Oh, come
The
on.
best way to attract high-ticket coaching clients is not to spend all your time and money on social media content creation and trying to go viral on TikTok.
Shut up, lady. We don't need it.
When it comes to using anti-intellectualism to unethically protect their own interests and profit, there is no better example than the corporate sector of America. The American mode of capitalism has always been predicated on exploitation.
Yes.
Corporations continue to exploit a population of consumers that have fallen victim to being poorly informed and distracted.
Yes.
The most destructive example of this is the ongoing denial and reluctance of corporations.
Before we get to this, I want to show y'all this scene right here. This is the powerful scene right here. I'm going to tell you why. You want to know why Manhattan keeps you looking up? You don't know why Manhattan keeps you looking up at all those lights and all this and that? And I'm going to tell you something. People who were like really born and raised in New York City all their lives do not go to Manhattan, and they do not like Manhattan. The reason why is because they know the history of what Manhattan is. And trust me, when you find out the history of Manhattan, I still love Manhattan, okay? I'm not going to hold you because I'm a hipster New Yorker. We are the time travelers of New York City, okay? But New Yorkers, they don't like Manhattan. Manhattan keeps you up, keeps you looking up, so you don't pay attention to what's really going on. Manhattan got secret little places and doors and stuff that you can walk to. Okay, Manhattan. We already know with the architecture and the Masonic symbolism and shit like that in Manhattan, but that ain't important. Manhattan is a bunch of trash, y'all. For all of you who've ever been to Times Square, 42nd Street, I don't know, name whatever street in Manhattan, y'all, because we don't call it Manhattan, we call it the city. Notice I said that. When you go out there, you are walking on fucking trash. That's why it stinks, and that's why it's so many fucking rats the size of a cat. Manhattan is the most delusional motherfucking place. Place that you can fucking be in. Do you understand me? The bums live underground. Manhattan is dark. Okay, yeah, a lot of y'all wouldn't come if y'all knew what I knew about Manhattan. Okay, and on top of Manhattan, the history of Manhattan is that it was dead horse heads in the street. It was feces in the fucking street. They had to make Manhattan pretty because Manhattan was so goddamn disgusting from the Jewish immigrants.
And distracted. The most destructive example of this is the ongoing denial and reluctance of corporations and government officials backed by those corporations to make any significant changes in economic policy in order to mitigate the effects of climate change, despite the reality that those changes would benefit the economy. This is accomplished by the use of anti-rationalist narratives that minimize the seriousness of climate change, or by rejecting its existence in entirety, ignoring the overwhelming amount of scientific evidence supporting the matter. Sponsored by the largest privately owned coal company in America, the Murray Energy Corporation, the Rocky Mountain Coal Mining Institute have peddled disinformation claiming coal is more affordable than clean energy, a statement that has been proven to be untrue by multiple independent studies. Social psychologists have theorized this inclination to seek out profit over public safety as an example of what is called a social dilemma, which can be defined as a situation that has a reward structure that favors individuals who act selfishly rather than in ways that benefit the larger social collective. These corporate tactics of anti-intellectualism are not new to American culture and were employed for decades by the tobacco industry. Corporations will discredit science, scientists, and logic in order to generate wealth for investors and corporate executives at the expense of the population and the biophysical environment's health. We can see that this is how structures of power use anti-intellectualism to their benefit. But how do you counter anti-intellectualism in your own life? I'm sure at one point or another, you've been in conversation with a friend or a family member about some issue that you just disagreed on completely. And you knew deep in your heart that you understood the truth because you watched a ContraPoints or Vsauce video on the topic 2 months ago, but they still wouldn't agree or get it. What do you do in this situation? Well, first things first,
What you gonna say?
don't take advice from anyone on YouTube. Seriously, be extremely critical of anything on here.
I like the way he said that, but here, let's get back to that part where he said about people in your personal life and talking to them. Well, let's take it here. Why is it that when there are women who speak truth, right, about nature, let's just talk about nature, right? Not even just male nature, animal nature, the nature of the trees, the nature of water bugs, and why they come into our home, you know what I'm saying? The nature of a fruit, or whatever it is, right? Why is it that when you begin to get into that intricate way of a conversation, people reject because we are in a male society? That's the fucking answer. We are in a male-centered society in America too, more than what people. We are very, very male-centered society, because I can tell you in other countries, at least the women can have their femininity, their creativity, their intelligence, and some sort of freedom of the mind, in a sense of being able to educate themselves and do what they want to do. Because you can say what you want to say about those women in Pakistan and all of that, but them some smart ass bitches. Them are scientists and doctors. Those are our scientists and doctors. Those are the ones that are truly going to cure cancer for us. It's just so fucked up what the males is doing to them, but at the same time, they do still get to be our doctors and our scientists, and I do appreciate that. You know what I'm saying? Through the bullshit. Right? I think somebody was telling me something is happening over there with the women, or something the men don't want the women talking, or something like that, or listening. Oh, they don't want the women listening to other women, and then they were like, well, what about their own voice, right? Yeah, I don't remember, but yeah. So the point is, these women are doctors and scientists over there, and they get to do that, But the point is, that's why that level of mind gets rejected. People have a problem with someone who even speaks in a certain tone. Have you noticed that everybody has this very goofy, happy way that they talk? This very kind of, and even if they kind of sound like they're angry, or a motivational speaker or a preacher, that to me is kind of like unintelligent in a way. Because like, this is how I talk, this is, when I walk outside, I talk like this, So you have people that's not how they communicate when they do communicate. And especially when you are a woman. Oh, my lasagna. When you are a woman, they definitely don't like it. All right, go ahead.
Second thing would be to identify logical fallacies that regularly appear in anti-intellectual arguments. Fallacies that appear in the faulty reasoning of anti-intellectualism are used to distract or delegitimize arguments on irrelevant grounds. Here are a few examples. Whataboutism is defined as the technique or practice of responding to an accusation or difficult question by making a counter-accusation or raising a different issue. This tactic is regularly used to defend the status quo and avoid change. For example, not changing environmental policy because other countries are polluting the environment as well. This can be avoided by acknowledging that both circumstances are a problem, and then try to return to the original topic of conversation. Another way in which anti-intellectualism comes through is willful ignorance. Willful ignorance is when a person will avoid acknowledgement of contrary evidence that would undermine or invalidate their perspective, usually based on values, intuition, emotions, or anecdotal evidence. This is a much more difficult circumstance. Sometimes all that can be done is to try your best to understand the emotion behind the reasoning, as well as practicing compassion towards the person and their perspective. Since people don't have universal experiences or share the same background, coming to an agreement might be difficult. And finally, the best way to combat anti-intellectualism is to recognize it within yourself. Understand and acknowledge the limitations of your own intelligence, and be willing to have challenging conversations. Anti-intellectualism has become more prominent due to the many social issues that have popularized in recent years. The systemic denigration of science-based facts and the pursuit of theory and knowledge is nothing new to American culture, and has been destructive to communities in the past. Politicians and powerful corporations have used anti-intellectualism as a psychological tool to gain control over various demographics. But it's best to keep an open mind when encountering anti-intellectualism in your life. My name is Inhuman Form, and thanks for watching this video all the way to this point. Since you enjoy interesting topics like this, be sure to click one of these videos that pop up.
This is a very simple one. I got another one with someone else speaking. I want to say this though. I love the way it ended, because it was like, check the anti-intellectualism in yourself. Now me, I don't have that. I love to be challenged mentally. I love to have high level conversations. I really do. And I realized in my past, I was goofy with some people and platforms and shit, because I didn't take them motherfuckers serious. You feel me? Because any platform where anything was a very serious conversation, I indulged into it seriously. But intuitively, there's like, you can find me on them divested panels and I'm cutting a fool, because I ain't take them motherfuckers serious. I didn't. After a while, I was just like, y'all motherfuckers y'all clowns. You know what I'm saying? Now they got serious. See what I'm saying? Now they got serious. More than before, because they realized that shit wasn't funny, you know. But let me go ahead and go down this list and let me see. I had another one. It's a woman. She said, why everyone stopped reading. We didn't talk about pseudo intellectuals. I didn't listen to that one because I don't know. She looks pretty young. Why everyone stopped reading. So we're gonna go to this lady right here. Why everyone stopped reading, because this was intriguing to me, because I was just like, I was having a conversation and I was telling them, I was like, you know, being down here in the South now, like in the city, one thing you do see, not just in a small town. Let me make that clear, because in North Carolina there are cities, you know what I'm saying, and you do see more city people type activities, you know what I'm saying. But I noticed since I've been here, and I've traveled, the furthest I traveled was Charlotte, you know what I'm saying. But that was a small town. The other side I traveled on the other side, but that was like a small town too. But yeah, they you know, the city, like, you could see everybody with a book, especially on the train. There's actually a whole train series of people, the books that people subway creatures. They have a whole series of people reading books.
Welcome back to my channel.
Shelly Swearingen.
Today I am going to be talking about why people aren't reading anymore. This is a direct response to a video Jared Henderson did on his channel, and I was so surprised at how much what he was relaying, some of his theories as to why people don't read anymore, is actually aligned with my teaching experience and my experience in education. So I'm going to share that experience with you now. If you are new to my channel, then hi, I'm Shelly. I love thinking about reading, why we read, what's going on with reading in our society and in our world. But mostly I talk about what I read and the books that I buy on this channel. If you're liking the vibe, I would encourage you to subscribe, stick around. Without any further rambling on, let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. I will leave Jared Henderson's brilliant video linked down below. It was absolutely thought-provoking, which is why I'm doing this video today. So Jared
has a great channel too.
How there's this new phenomenon going on among
I'm telling everyone in the industry to never work with you.
Ouch. Those words sting like a paper cut dipped in lemon juice. Your business is sinking fast.
College students, those who are actually admitted into elite universities like Columbia. College students have recently confessed that reading a book a week is actually too much of a workload for them. And so it begs the question, why is that? So he ends up going back to how we actually learn language. For a very, very long time, we learned through phonics. that the most popular way to teach reading is through breaking words into sounds. And once we learn the sounds, we can actually sound out words and then thus read, as a very simplified version of phonics. But back in the 1960s, we shifted the educational system in a lot of different places, shifted to whole language learning, which is more about encountering whole text, whole words, and not necessarily beginning with the building blocks of letters and sounds and putting them together. And through the years, we have learned that whole language learning is less effective. Really, it's not a very great tool to teach kids learning that really we ought to go back to phonics. But those who learned with whole language learning maybe never really got the grasp of reading as a pleasurable thing, that it is always going to be a struggle. And since it happened in the US for such a long period of time, that there are a lot of people, a lot of adults that still find reading incredibly difficult. And that was kind of the first point that Jared made. The second point that he made was more about standardized testing and No Child Left Behind. Here's actually where my personal story converges quite a bit with what Jared Henderson was saying. It has to do with standardized testing in particular. Now, if you don't know or have not been in the educational system, testing is massive. It carries a huge weight in our educational systems today. It is the thing for which we get funding for. At least a lot of schools get funding through whether you get kids to grow, how well they perform. There are kids that are broken into classes because of how they test on one single test rather than looking at the whole child. Testing is scrutinized and theorized and looked at so much, and a lot of it hinges on maybe a couple of tests per year. So I didn't know this when I was a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed teacher, or when I wanted to get into teaching. And actually the first time I encountered K-12 public education was when I was a teacher, because I was homeschooled. And for any of you curious minds out there, my mother taught me how to read through the phonics system. So I came into public school not really knowing much about the public school experience, and coming in as an adult just wanting to share my love for reading and language and literature with the students that I encountered. And I was assigned and got a job as a 6th and 7th grade English teacher. Now, what I didn't know was how much I would be discouraged to read whole texts with my students. But I'm getting slightly ahead of myself. I noticed right away that we were, as teachers, were implored to teach students snippets of text, that we were supposed to derive meaning and understanding from a few paragraphs, that our responses, my students should be responding in writing, verbally, to only a page or two of text, and at most 5 or 10 pages of a text. But we weren't reading an entire book. And so that first year, I remember trying to sneak an entire novel in. And what I mean by sneak is that it was very discouraged that we read entire novels. And I'm not talking novels that weren't approved by the county that I was working for. I'm talking about novels that were 100% approved by our, by the school district, by the school, that these novels were ready and available, and yet I could not use them because they said, the district, my curriculum coaches at the time, all of them were saying that students are not going to encounter an entire novel on a test. Rather, they're going to be encountering excerpts of informational text, literature, and so on. And so we need to get them ready for the test. And this was told to me pretty much from day one. And so in my 5 years of teaching public education, I tried again to sneak a novel in. I was a little rebellious, I will tell you that. I was slightly disobedient in that I would always try and teach a novel, and inevitably I even had changes in leadership while I was teaching at this particular school. Every single year, I would get caught teaching a novel as if that is something shameful. And I was told to go back to teaching snippets, to teaching excerpts.
Yes, let's get into that. I was waiting for her to say this part. I feel true teaching, true teaching is allowing the teacher to teach in the way how they've learned. Because that's what teaching is. Every time I get on this microphone for all my years since the age of 22, okay, I have read books, I have read them aloud, I have written, and I have got on a microphone and taught from the very thing that I have read or I have learned. And that's what teaching comes from. You learn more from teaching what you have learned. When I learn Spanish and I go out here and I teach Spanish, when I learn Spanish and I teach English to people who speak Spanish, that is me learning the language as well as teaching what I've learned by teaching English to people. And I could do that for free at a college, you know? So therefore, whoever the teacher is, let's say we have 4 different teachers, 4 different math teachers, right? 2 math, 2 English is okay. So these 2 different math teachers have a way that they teach math to the students from how they learned math or from the books that they have learned math, right? These 2 English teachers teach English from the way that they have learned English. Do you know there's some teachers that if they have to teach from the way that they're trying to tell the students to teach, that the student can't capture it? It was one time I had to explain paraphrasing to the middle child. What grade was that? 4th grade. And I had to explain paraphrasing. And the teacher even said, I can't even explain it. So then I had to explain to my child what paraphrasing was, and my child received it from me. So these are the little type of things that helps, for children to learn, because we want them to learn. The key is for your students to learn. And that is what's missing in schools.
And getting the students to analyze poetry, literature, informational text, but only in pieces. Those who are thinking now about these college students at elite universities, scratching their head as to why students are unable to keep up with a pace of reading a novel a week, that they trace it back to the fact that students are only taught how to perform well on tests. And that is so in line with my experience as a teacher. It was a really frustrating and disappointing experience to constantly be told, you're doing it wrong if you want to read a novel with your class. You're doing it wrong. You're not teaching the way that we want you to teach if you want to experience a novel with your students. So then it brings Jared Henderson to...
I can proudly say, check out Jared Henderson has a great channel. I won't even say good. It's a great informational channel. I appreciate YouTube channels like his, and I don't know, something about those people that are like into philosophy. Listen, the philosophers and Rad Fem channels are like those, man, you're dealing with some sharp ass fucking minds, man. And I just like the way that they do it, But that's me, okay? Now let's just take, for example, everything I just said. Let's say we have someone like Jared Henderson, Mr. Jared Henderson, that is teaching, let's just give it a grade. Let's say he's teaching 5th grade, right? Because we all know that 5th grade was that grade, right? Everybody knows that 5th grade is that damn grade that it makes you feel like that's the scary grade. It just feels like you're going to get held back, and something about that 5th grade, right? So anyway, but once you pass 5th grade and you get 5th grade, you feel very confident in making it to middle school from 6th to 8th grade, right? So if he was to teach 5th grade, just imagine how he would teach these students from the way that he is learning for himself. And how to test, how to read, teaching the students how to take a test, how they can pass their tests, teaching them how to read, context clues. I can honestly say I had some great teachers in my school years. I can tell you that. I did not like my teachers in college when I went to college in Brooklyn. I didn't like them too much. But I will say that the teachers that I had through my school years, I appreciate them because they are the reason why I love critical thinking, why I love reading so much. I'm not taking that away from my mom and dad. I'm not doing that, but I'm just saying why I enjoy reading so much, why that I still write the way that I write. They are the reason that I do a lot of what I do today, and getting on a microphone and talking and discussing things and intellectual, conversations and shit like that. And they all look like Jared, and they all look like that lady that's talking. And I have to say that, and I've met people who come from urban communities, and I never really hear them ever speak about a teacher that they appreciate. They always appreciate the teacher for like, oh, that teacher was there for me and they pushed me to graduate. It's never in the way in which I speak about how I learned from that teacher as far as like education wise. Let's go.
His final point in his video, which is how we lack some of the stamina, or we do lack the stamina to sit down and do something boring or really less stimulating than looking on our phones or video games, iPads, looking at our devices. Our attention is constantly being grabbed at because we have a phone nearby, or we're checking our phone right before we read, which really just gets us sucked into a black hole of scrolling, and thus putting off the thing that we need to do, which in the end, reading is far more rewarding than doom scrolling on one's phone, or really just scrolling in general on one's phone. But sometimes we get caught up in our phones, our iPads, and we don't have the discipline. And at school, we're not being taught the discipline to sit down and read for 20 minutes, or to sit down and not look at a device and read for an hour. So even though many of these students who have gotten into the universities are capable of reading a novel a week, they often lack the attention span to do so. I have something cheerful to end on, in that I have switched from public education to private education. I now teach at a private school, and very early on, I was so impressed and excited by our cell phone policy at the school that I teach at, and actually at the school that I've taught at in all private school educations. I've taught at a couple of them now, and they all implement a really strict cell phone policy. The policy is that the phones need to be off and away, not even seen. You can't check it during mealtime. It is off and away. We don't even want to know you have it. In this setting, we have 8 hours.
I know how my screen
Hold on. Before you pay for yet another app to manage your team, let me introduce you to Connecting, the one platform that replaces all of these. I'm talking about live scheduling, time tracking, and digital.
Trying to get fucking copyright for these commercials, bro.
8 hours of time in which we don't look at screens. I will sometimes play a video that has to do with the curriculum. I will sometimes play a video that ties in with our learning for that day. There are devices in the room, but the student's attention is not being grabbed at by their own personal device while they are learning. And I think as a teacher, it's so much better for the brain, not to mention I could go on and on about the social aspects of not having devices in front of us all the time. There is a real presence that the students have. They're not in their own little world. They're connecting with each other. They're connecting with me. What's important is connecting with me. What is important is that they're connecting with each other, and they're not being constantly distracted with their cell phone at all times. I wonder this: if in some time from now, there might be a study in which researchers focus on the public versus private school education, or really not that harsh of a divide, but the education of a school in which there were no cell phones allowed in the classroom, and in which we do read the entire novels, we study entire novels, versus only reading excerpts and having cell phones in the classroom as a distraction. I wonder if there will show some seismic differences between the two educational systems and settings. I would be very curious as to what that data would look like, and what it would say about how we learn and how children are learning in this age where so much is vying for our attention. Thank you so much to Jared for making the video and giving me some food for thought. I really appreciate it. And I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye.
And see, and somebody like this woman here, thank you for this video, this woman right here, she grew up homeschooled. So I could imagine what that was for her to be a homeschool child, to become a teacher and really want to be a teacher from all this, to have to get the reality of public school. That's what I think is the hard part for anybody who's a homeschool parent. That part right there is the heartbreak, because to see the parent who homeschools the child needs to know that they're homeschooled too. So they don't have to deal with public school because they're homeschooling the child. So they're homeschooling. So then when they have to take the child to public school, then they have to deal with public school, and they have to get a culture shock too with dealing with public school because they never had to deal with it. Let me go ahead and play Jared's video, and then after that, we're going to do how empires fall while the U.S. is next. And I'm going to go a little bit further.
At universities all around the country, professors are reporting a problem. Students can't
is it a commercial?
Can't read books. This is true even at elite colleges and universities. In one required class at Columbia, students are often expected to read about a book a week. But in the past couple of years, students have started telling their professors that they can't do it. One student told her professor that she had never been required to read an entire book. This is part of a larger trend. People aren't reading anymore. This is true for men and women, people who went to college and people who didn't. So what's going on? Well, it turns out that there are many pieces to this puzzle, but it all begins with how we teach kids to read. For a very long time, we taught kids to read in a very particular way. We called it phonics. With phonics, you start with individual sounds. You work your way up from those sounds into more complex sounds, and then you see how those sounds build words. If you come across an unfamiliar word, you're told to sound it out. But starting around the 1960s, a new approach to language education emerged, and we called this whole language learning. In whole language learning and some successor ideas like balanced literacy, the idea was that you should learn to read at the level of a word. Using a method called 3Qing, students were taught to infer the meaning of words from context. This whole approach was pitched as a very natural, almost kind of organic way to teach kids how to read. The idea was that actually that kids had a natural propensity to read, and that all you needed to do was put them in the right context and maybe give them a few small techniques or nudges, and they would basically teach themselves how to read. You wouldn't have to go through a kind of boring process like learning phonics. It's actually kind of a romantic idea, right? It'd be lovely if kids just had this natural ability to read as long as we just put them in the right environment. And it makes reading feel more like an art than a science. The only problem is that whole language learning didn't work.
And we're back. The team is looking down the barrel of a 4:55 meeting.
Can they turn it around and make this meeting an email?
Jones is taking the ball and running with it. She's asking Grimley to write the first draft of
Literacy rates fell, and in the countries which had adopted whole language learning, that would be parts of the United States, Canada, the UK, New Zealand, Australia, more and more kids weren't able to read at grade level. It was a systemic failure of education systems across multiple countries. And if we're trying to explain why people don't read anymore, well, this has to be part of the story. If you weren't taught how to read properly, reading is never going to be something that you do for fun. It's never going to be pleasurable. It's going to feel really difficult and like a lot of work. And so if more and more people find reading difficult, then they're just going to stop reading. Now, whole language learning and balanced literacy, these were never uncontested ideas. Despite the fact that they were adopted in so many countries, there were always people who were pushing back. And this was something that became known as the reading wars. In some states, it was described as the most vicious debate in politics. Journalists and scientists have been reporting on the damaging effects of whole language learning, and actually, we might be able to say that COVID-19 is going to lead to a change in how kids learn to read. Because during the pandemic, when more kids were learning at home, their parents got to see how ineffective whole language learning really was. And that added a lot of political will to solving the problem. More and more states and even countries are bringing back phonics into their reading programs. And while some of the insights from whole language learning might stay in the classroom, at least kids are going to be learning those basic building blocks, which the data do seem to indicate actually would help them. So maybe we'll see a turn in the future where more people want to read for pleasure again. For the students who were never taught phonics, though, much of the damage is already done, and I don't know how to fix that problem. Now, this is speculation, but I would be willing to bet that kids who make it into a school like Columbia or other elite universities are probably able to read at grade level, but they were still telling their professors that they didn't feel capable of reading a book in even a week. And these are kids, remember, who are mostly full-time students. They have a lot of free time, and actually their studies should be their main focus. So just pointing out sort of the disastrous effects of whole language learning isn't going to adequately explain why fewer people are reading. But part of the explanation does still seem to come from the way that these kids were taught in school. And it has to do with education reforms, most infamously things like No Child Left Behind and Common Core. Those are at least the names for education reforms in the United States. Other countries have different systems. I'm not talking about those here. The push to reform education in the United States emphasized two things: informational text and standardized testing. When students were being taught how to engage with the text, they were learning how to extract information from it. You would even see people say that books were outdated and that we needed to teach kids about the text that they would actually encounter in real life, like articles or web pages. So as an exercise, a student might be presented with an excerpt from a longer text. They would be asked to analyze the argument or talk about what evidence was presented in the text, or even what the thesis statement was. And a lot of this would happen in English classes, where traditionally you would be first exposed to reading longer and more difficult books. So instead of learning things like analyzing symbolism or theme, or being able to practice your close reading of text, you were mostly focused on extracting information from those excerpts. Doing that traditional English stuff like close reading builds something that we could call your reading stamina. And when a student who is fully capable of reading says that they can't read a whole book in a week, it's likely because they haven't had a chance to develop their reading stamina. And in fact, some professors and teachers, even in high schools or middle schools, say that kids' reading stamina has been declining steadily over the years as well. If you're trying to build your reading stamina, one of the things you can do is just read books. Just sit down and try to see how many pages you can get through before you have to go and do something else. But students increasingly aren't actually being given those opportunities in the classroom or even in assignments. In one survey, only 17% of educators said that they were teaching primarily with whole text. So when it comes to those students at elite colleges and universities, or even just colleges and universities in general, who say that they can't read a whole book, I think it has more to do with this than it does with problems with whole language learning. I think this is the better explanation for why students at Columbia or other great universities aren't able to read whole books. These students were able to get into some of the best colleges and universities in the world, but they were never taught how to be great readers. They were taught how to be great test takers. So when these students get to college and they're asked to read whole books, they can't do it because this is a completely different skill than they've been told that they need to develop in high school. So much of their education has been about optimizing themselves for standardized tests and then eventually to take something like the SAT or the ACT. And if you're just trying to do really well on a standardized test, you need to focus on reading excerpts and being able to answer multiple choice questions, or maybe write a 5-paragraph essay about what you just read. You don't have to focus on analyzing themes in Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Dickens. You don't have to worry about reading great books. So then if you have a required freshman class that's about great novels in the Western tradition, well, this might be your first time being exposed to many of those great novels in the Western tradition. And it's going to be hard, because you're not used to it. So when we look at the big picture, we have some students who were never taught how to read properly because of things like whole language learning. And then we have students who were never taught how to read books because of an emphasis on standardized testing. But when we want to talk about why other people have stopped reading for fun or just stopped reading in general, there's one more thing we have to talk about, and it's the phones. So something that gets overlooked in a lot of these discussions is that many people actually do spend their days reading. It's just that they're not reading books. If you're scrolling on YouTube or Twitter, then you are actually encountering an endless stream of text. More text than many people throughout history would have encountered in a week or a month. TikTok is maybe the most addictive of these platforms, and practically every video has burned-in captions. So people are constantly reading something when they are online. And if you're driving,
I gotta put out this microphone. Fixing my audio, y'all. Hold on. I had to take the microphone out. The computer's too hot. That's what's going on. It's cracking and shit.
You're seeing road signs, you're seeing billboards, you're seeing advertisements. The world wants you to read. It just doesn't really want to give you the time that it takes to read a good book. So this is my backyard, and occasionally I'll come and I'll bring a book, and I'll try to get some reading done. It's peaceful and it's quiet, and it's one of the places that I really love. So maybe I start reading the book, and I'll feel really good, and then within just a few seconds, this thing wants my attention. So if I want to get any reading done, I have to be disciplined, and I have to decide that my phone needs to stay inside, someplace where it can't distract me. Now imagine that you're a college student and you've never read a full book in a week, or really ever been asked to read a hard or long book for your education. And your professor says, hey, I want you to read Homer's Iliad in a week. Let's say you're a good sport too, and so you go to your dorm room, you get your book, and you say, you know what, I'm going to do it. But now think about all the things that are there ready to distract you. Other people, or your phone, or your laptop. Anything with a screen really is there, and it's ready to just make you feel more stimulated. Because let's face it, even if we're people who really like to read, compared to doing other things, the act of reading is really boring. It is the antithesis of our sort of constant need to be overstimulated. A lot of schools, high schools, middle schools, things like that, have decided to start banning smartphones in the classroom. And my reaction, of course, is like, what took you so long? Of course, students aren't going to be able to read or learn properly if they're constantly distracted by their phones. So not only have we systematically failed students as we've taught them to read, or not taught them to read in some cases, we've also just designed a world that is there to constantly demand our attention, and that takes us away from those deep or reflective, sort of focus-heavy practices like reading good books. So when adults try to say why they don't read anymore, usually cite three things. They don't have time, they can't pay attention long enough, or they blame social media. And I suspect that all of these are related. The fact that we don't have time or that we can't focus is in part because of things like social media, other forms of easy entertainment, are there to take up all of our time. I often like to read before bed, and occasionally I'll tell myself that I need to check my phone before I start reading. And I'll find that I end up scrolling for an hour without even realizing it. Time seems to flow differently when I'm on my phone.
I'm gonna tell y'all something else too. Trauma. Trauma is another reason why people don't read. Trauma is another reason why people don't want to pick up a book. You probably don't want to believe it, but you may have some trauma around being creative and artistic. You may have some trauma around being not only creative and artistic, but you may have some trauma around even just reading a book. And that's something that need to be faced. And that's something that I believe happened to me. I know that happened to me, even with my writing and everything. And that's why I'm picking everything back up, because when I sat here and I saw, you mean to tell me in ancient times, motherfuckers was feeling just how I felt? People who ain't even here no more? That was all the wake-up call I need. And the reality of just like America just does not like smart people or intelligent people was a wake-up call for me to just change my life.
Compared to when I'm trying to do something more demanding, like reading. It's easier, it's more instantly pleasurable, even though at the end of the day, I feel terrible about it. So I expect that a lot of the things that I found are true for me could be true for you or for many other people, and are part of this broader explanation of why nobody reads anymore. So the result of all this is that fewer and fewer people read books. You have your super readers who read tons of books, and they keep the average numbers up. But you have more and more people who decide that reading just isn't for them. I don't know exactly what we're supposed to do about that, but that's where we are.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, let's get to this America falling shit. Because I'm ready to watch this shit. I have not watched this one. It's my first time watching it. Because this is the reality that I see. Oh, shit. Where'd the playlist go?
You know the best way to grow on
And
YouTube
it's a harsh,
good content.
it's a harsh reality.
Videos
But
and
man, it's
software
the
built to
reality.
help you.
America, man. Whew.
Every empire falls. That is certain. no matter how long they reigned and how far their rule stretched. From the Romans who ruled for over 1,000 years, to the Ottomans who spanned continents, and the USSR that changed the political landscape of the modern world. So is the empire we're living under today also crumbling?
Yes. The key question is how fast.
We have bounties beyond those known to the people of any other day.
American democracy is obviously limping on both feet.
America is not the greatest country in the world anymore.
The US empire is falling, and there are 3 symptoms of its impending demise that we can see from looking to the past. Let's start with the oldest of the bunch. These videos are made possible by our supporters on Patreon. If you'd like to help us tell more stories like this, you can become a paying member through the link in the description. Now back to the video. The Roman Empire oversaw the lives of millions of people. Remnants of its great reign still stand in cities across the world, a testament to their reach and influence in the lands they conquered.
Never has Rome been greater or stronger than now!
But then, after 1,000 years of domination, it fell. And just like Rome wasn't built in a day, it didn't fall in one either. Instead, the fall of the Roman Empire was death by 1,000 cuts. But there's one factor in particular we're going to look at: internal decay.
At the height of its grandeur and its glory, a civilization so powerful it could never be conquered from without. Yet it found the seeds of its destruction within itself.
There was a huge disparity between the lives of the elite and the commoners. Rome's elites lived in grand estates, hosting lavish, decadent banquets where they'd feast on peacock tongue and wine from naked waiters.
Every one of these senatorial families has holdings all over the Roman Empire. They're the equivalent of small multinational corporations. They are wealthy in a way that is impossible for us to understand.
The poor lived a very different reality. They worked menial jobs and lived mostly on bread and porridge, living in overcrowded, badly built buildings, prone to collapse and spreading disease.
The games are all about Roman emperors giving the people what they need, and it's always described as bread and circuses. They had to feed the people of Rome, but once they were fed, they had to be entertained.
Let the games begin!
There were famines, peasant uprisings, and slavery, and the Roman tax system disproportionately impacted the lower classes, while the wealthy often avoided taxes through exemption or corruption.
This is now a new era of Roman history. Rome is no longer what it was. Rome is in decline.
The middle class was shrinking, and the economy became increasingly polarized between the very rich and the very poor, all fueling resentment and instability. So what does this tell us about the US?
All they've always dreamed of, the happiest investment they have ever made.
The middle class was once a symbol of the American dream. It meant owning your own home with a white picket fence, a car, kids going to school, a perceived ease and quality of life that couldn't be found anywhere else in the world, and that anyone could achieve so long as they worked hard enough.
We are a prospering people, wherever we live, or earn our livelihood.
But for the past 2 decades, that's all become increasingly out of reach for lots of Americans.
Some people skipping meals because they simply can't afford it.
The number of people experiencing homelessness in a single night went up 12%.
Every year, hundreds of thousands of people are literally asking for donations to afford medical treatment.
Our roads and bridges are crumbling, our airports are out of date, and the vast majority of our seaports are in danger of becoming obsolete.
Americans from the grocery store to the gas station are seeing their budgets tighten every single month.
And the changes suggested would mean higher taxes for the average American family, widening America's already massive income gap.
90% of the wealth is right here at the top. And then the lower middle class, they've got 0.3% of a piece here. They got some crumbs there. And the poorest, they have no pie. In fact, they have less than no pie. They actually have a bill for pie. They're in pie debt.
They're struggling to meet rent or mortgage payments, repay college loans, to repay loans for a car.
While the wealthy have become steadily wealthier, wages have been stagnant and costs of living have surged. And it's not like these changes are mutually exclusive. It's off the backs of workers, off the exploitation of the American masses, that the wealthy continue to engorge themselves.
Elon Musk has officially become the richest person in the world. His net worth has crossed the $400 billion mark.
Companies buying out the housing market, insurance companies making healthcare unaffordable, politicians taking money from lobbies to protect corporate interests and fill their own pockets, and the working class is well aware.
Hoarding wealth is so harmful, so unethical, so rage-inducing.
Billionaires should not exist. So you talk about teacher salary, $2,000 in rent, $400 car payment, you got insurance, you got groceries, electricity, I don't understand how people are affording life right now.
For 5 stitches, $3,800.
What? It's so freaking hard to live here.
North America is one big scam.
And then there's the eternal social and political decay. People have become disenchanted with the illusion of American democracy, of its promises of equality, of equal opportunity for all as long as you pick yourself up by your bootstraps.
You can see a sea of people all united under one cause. They are protesting for racial equality.
The murder of a healthcare executive has led to online popularity for the shooter.
Mangione has emerged in some circles as a sympathetic figure fighting the system.
All this leads to political instability, economic trouble, and social unrest, which weakens the empire at its core. But an empire is bigger than its center. It's a network of vassal states serving the core's interests, and keeping all those entities in check is done through both soft power and hard power. That brings us to symptom number 2. To understand soft power and how it plays into imperial decline, let's look at the Ottomans.
It was a huge empire, dominated by a Turkish dynasty that had its origins in Asia Minor.
The Ottoman Empire was one of the most powerful and enduring empires in history, spanning 3 continents at its height. It was a hub of cultural and scientific innovation, producing advancements in medicine, astronomy, architecture, and engineering that changed the world.
They ruled a considerable mix of peoples and faiths.
There was no great history of ethnic tension, even though there was a history of massively complicated ethnic and confessional coexistence.
It lasted almost 600 years, until it didn't. One factor that contributed to its demise was its waning influence over the peoples and territories it had under its control, also known as the loss of soft power. Soft power is about being more persuasive than coercive, about getting people to comply without using force. In the case of the Ottomans, it was a delicate balance of diplomacy and cultural influence. But over time, the empire's ability to foster loyalty among diverse groups was eroding, aided by rising nationalism within these communities.
The Greeks were the first to rebel against the Ottoman shackles.
The minute you start getting a political world, this system is going to break down. And that is what happens in the 19th century, and that is the great conundrum for the empire.
People stopped buying into the vision of the empire and began to break off and pursue their own interests. Now, the US has been really good at soft power. It began after World War II, when the US positioned itself as a global leader promoting democracy, economic growth, and cultural influence.
Joe's the king because he can buy more with his wages than any other worker on the globe.
It is the most important idea that the United States has contributed to the world. Citizens of every rank can expect to have a better, richer, happier life.
It helped rebuild war-torn Europe, set up major global institutions where it continues to hold significant power, and has exported music, television, and pop culture across the world for decades. And the messaging of this soft power has been consistent and clear.
Shining city upon a hill. After 200 years, she's still a beacon, still a magnet for all who must have freedom.
But for soft power to work, for people to buy into the fantasy and want to participate, they need to see credibility and moral consistency. Now, just to be clear, the US has violated the principles it preaches since its founding, not to mention since its emergence as a global hegemon. It seems the majority of people were willing to overlook that and buy into the American dream. But the illusion is falling apart.
The mob tore down scaffolding, battled their way through the last line of police defense, and broke into the Capitol building itself.
At home, the land of democracy, liberty, and human rights hasn't kept up the best image in recent years, and it's not any better abroad. The US has spearheaded and overseen devastating wars, crippling debt, human rights violations, and environmental damage across the world, which has made it hard to take preaching of democracy and freedom seriously.
America no longer charts a course and therefore has lost all rights to set it, and even more so to impose it on others.
Disillusionment with American values is growing, and in its panic, the empire continues to thrash and bully to stay relevant.
Thank you.
That's where hard power comes in, and brings us to the third symptom of the fall of an empire. This one is best illustrated by the Soviet Union. Now, the USSR ideologically rejected the idea of imperialism, but the reality is that it looked and acted like an empire.
The Soviet Communist Party has not faced a serious internal threat to its political rule since the 1920s.
There was a centralized authority overseeing expansion and control of a collection of republics and satellite states, where movements for autonomy were suppressed. What tethered these states together was a unified ideology, communism. But it was also hard power, military might. And that costs money.
It is here, in Red Square, that the superpower Soviet...
Remember, I keep talking into the microphone. Do y'all remember that U.S. president game I played and I stopped playing? Because it was so much work. And how you have to go to the UN to decide if you want to fight somebody or if you want to trade with them. How much I had to give out, how much I had to tax the people at one time. How it was important to build my military and shit. I suggest everybody play that game. It tells you how the U.S. presidency works.
The Soviet Union holds its military parades, displaying its might for all the world to see.
At its strongest, the Soviet Union had 5 million soldiers stationed around the Union, and pursued wars and conquests to maintain and expand its reach. Then there's all the money spent on the arms race during the Cold War. Money spent on propping up parties in proxy wars across the world, and money spent on wars like Afghanistan, a protracted 10-year-long conflict that cost them $50 billion.
The superpower from the north occupies Afghanistan with more than 100,000 troops, a modern mechanized army.
Eventually, the cost of keeping the empire in check became unmanageable, and the economy took a hit. By the late 80s, people within the Union were struggling with soaring poverty and a low quality of life, with no strategic wins to show for all that money spent. Military and ideological overextension drained not only the economy, but public morale as well, until people got fed up.
In Moscow, the hammer and sickle is lowered for the last time.
Sounds familiar.
All estimates agree that the cost will be at least $1 trillion. The Bush administration never expected the war to drag on as long as it has.
The fall of Kabul to the Taliban marked an abrupt end to America's longest war. The war cost American taxpayers about $1 trillion.
The U.S. carried out long, brutal, expensive wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, with nothing to show for it except instability and devastation and financial loss. Then there's the constant ideological wars. The war on communism, the war on drugs, the war on terror, the war on China and Russia. There's a constant boogeyman in the ether to justify US military spending. The US maintains the most bases in the world at over 700 and spends hundreds of billions of dollars on the military every year, more than the next 10 countries combined. It's funding Ukraine in its war against Russia. It might support Taiwan in a war against China. Billions of dollars spent, and we can't remember the last war the US has actually won. But last year, an undeniable awakening happened.
This has been a senseless and a deliberate slaughter, a genocide, and it is happening on our dime.
For over a year, Americans and the rest of the world have watched US politicians from both sides of the aisle cheer on and fund the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza to the tune of billions of dollars.
Can I tell you, when that Palestine and Israel shit happened, I was like, why? Why did America even get involved in that shit? That to me, to this day, I done dropped my shit on the floor. Can't find it. To this day, I don't understand. Why would you do that when you have Palestine and Israel people here in your country? Why would you do that? And oh my goodness.
It has shattered the idea that the US is a beacon of justice and human rights, and irreversibly cemented the hypocrisy of American moral exceptionalism. The empire has never been so exposed, and it's shown Americans who, back in the imperial core, continue to struggle to live decent, dignified lives where all their tax money is going, and where it's definitely not. The US has been an empire since its very conception.
I get that part. That I get. Yeah. Yes, because in the city, I remember, rest in peace to him, Eddie. He would be like, he stole from my country and now he's trying to steal from my store. And they will argue back and forth like all the time. And that was a war we had to watch in the city all the time. Okay? It's man, it's serious. And I mean, but still, man. Damn, bro. They must drop some money or something, because they fucking all the Palestine people went crazy, bro.
Colonizing Native American land, to conquering territories overseas, to dominating world politics through global institutions, military might, corporate interests, and foreign meddling. Of all the empires that have risen and fallen, none have come close to having the reach and power of the US. So the idea of it losing its hold over the world seems inconceivable. But while all these symptoms are unfolding and the US empire erodes from within and without, it's not doing so in a vacuum. It does so in the middle of a global shift in geopolitics, in a world that's becoming increasingly multipolar, with countries choosing new allies, new frameworks for collaboration, even new currencies.
The aim of the alliance is to challenge the economic and political monopoly of the West.
All of which is not good for the US. See, the way the global system is designed is, in many ways, for the benefit of America. From reliance on the dollar, US aid, and US debt, to fear of US sanctions, vetoes, and foreign intervention, we live in a world full of systems and institutions designed to prop up the US and keep the rest of the world in check. But these systems aren't going to live forever, because they're inherently unsustainable. They rely on the exploitation of peoples across the world and within the imperial core, and bank on them buying into the bid that all this is necessary, is better for them, and protects them. And as life becomes more unaffordable, countries more destabilized, governments more autocratic, and our environment more unlivable, people eventually wake up. And that's usually the beginning of the end.
Hey, that was good. She made that 2 weeks ago. That was good. I'm done. American Westerns suffer from battered wife syndrome. Yes, yep, I've heard that before. Ooh. Oh man. It's getting real out here, y'all. Now you see why. The school system, the education system itself, the lifestyle of the people. Did I ever read y'all an article that says that only in America people do friends before lovers? In other countries, like what was that country? It started with an L. And it was Russia, and it was, I forgot the name of this country. It started with an L, then it was Russia, and it was some other country. I want to just say the UK in general. And you know that these people said they don't do that? That if they like somebody and they want to be in a relationship with somebody, they be in a relationship. And it don't take them time to say, I love you either. Like if they feel like they love them, they love them. Only in America do friends before lovers and take their time before they tell somebody that they love them. While people in other countries don't even live, they didn't even agree with all that. They're like, what's the purpose? And here I was, somebody saying, I don't agree with friends before lovers. I think friends before lovers is highly deceitful if your intentions is to be with that person. Why not just be together? That's how I feel. Like, if we want to be together, let's just be together. But that's why I think friends before lovers, or that I married my friend, or I was with my friend, that's all, to me, that's manipulative shit. I don't really agree with that. And I stand on that. And reading that article proved everything I said. And I understand why friends of mine who date people who are foreign have a very different perspective and way that they date. And they look at the American way of dating. Well, why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you do that? Well, why won't you just say that? They don't understand that American way of dating. Especially if someone has been here for most of their life and they date foreign, and then they realize, like, whoa, wait a fucking minute. Because the Americans can make you feel stupid for thinking the way that you think. Well, how do you know? Well, you can have somebody you know since high school, but that don't mean you know them. People let you know what they want you to know about them. Even if you're intuitive enough to see things about them, people still is showing you what they want to show you about them. Some people can fake their whole life. You can have a friend that you think their mom and dad is really their mom and dad, come out their whole friend is adopted. They knew it, they fairly knew it, but you ain't know it. So, like, it's about how you get to know that person and how they choose and how you choose to be known. That's all I'm saying. Like, I'm not for the friends before lover shit. So, was there anything else? I did, but that's going to be another presentation. It was an infiltration video. Why did it stop? Why are we living through the end of an empire? The mass psychology of Trumpism. I'm going to do the mass psychology of Trumpism, about a 14 minute video. Let's go ahead and get into this one. Then I'm going to just go ahead and...
What if Trump wins? Mark Leibovich, author of Thank You for Your Servitude, warns, if Trump wins again, then we Americans will need to let go of the soothing notion that this is not who we are. Who is we, anyway? Because it sure seems like a lot of this we keeps voting for Trump. How is it possible that a twice impeached former president facing 91 criminal counts can now be favored to return to the Oval Office? Why do his supporters not recoil when Trump promises to unleash an authoritarian regime as president and to assume the role of dictator on day one? What explains his enduring appeal? Questions like these have been raised ever since Donald Trump began to gain political traction in early 2016. Back then he claimed quite presciently that he could
stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay?
Since then, countless observers have puzzled over the unshakable hold he exerts on a vast swath of the American electorate. Many factors, economic, political, cultural, psychological, are surely at play in shaping Trump's abiding relationship with his supporters. My argument, as strange as it might sound, is that Trump's enduring appeal stems from the perception, his own and others, that he is not a person. In the minds of millions, Trump is more than a person, and he is less than a person too. In 1962, a prominent Harvard psychologist published a scholarly paper entitled The Personality and Career of Satan. Henry A. Murray examined
we're
how...
not going there. Hold on. Anyway, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody tried to build a fucking statue of Trump, like a gladiator or some shit.
For over 2,000 years, Western theologians and other writers have depicted the mythical figure of Satan, projecting onto him human traits perennially designated as evil. It is worth noting that Murray's characterization of Satan bears an uncanny resemblance to the psychological portrait of Trump painted by many psychologists today. A malignant narcissism rages at the core of Satan's personality, cast out of heaven for his overmastering pride. Satan wants to be God, resents the fact that he is not God, and insists that his supreme worth entitles him to privileges that nobody else should enjoy, while undergirding his reign as sovereign of the mortal world below. Wholly self-centered, cruel, vindictive, and devoid of compassion and empathy, Satan nonetheless possesses substantial charisma and charm. Completely contractual in his approach to interpersonal relationships, he has perfected the art of the deal, as when, in the Gospel of Luke, Satan tempts Jesus with earthly powers and riches in return for his adulation. If thou wilt therefore...
I have a problem with the whole God and Satan thing, because I always feel like it takes away from looking at the realistic thing. I don't got time for people like this, because like I said, that's what I first thought, I don't got time for this. But I'm going to go ahead and just listen for a little bit, because this type of shit, to me, gets distracting.
Worship me, all shall be thine. Situated in a middle ground between God and human beings, Satan is a liminal figure. He is like a person, but not quite a person. For one, he is gifted with superhuman powers, of the sort, Murray writes, that children have always imagined they might possess in the furthest reaches of their wish-fulfilling fantasies. But he does not possess certain qualities that adults especially value and recognize as part of the human condition. He lacks wisdom, for example, and love. He is not troubled by a complex inner life, by the doubts, ambivalences, and moral quandaries that routinely run through the consciousness of mature humans. He is instead like the modern conception of a superhero, an idealized personification, rather than a fully articulated person. Donald Trump sees himself in the same way. While Trump insists that he is a force for good rather than evil, he truly perceives himself to be qualitatively different from the rest of humankind. He has often compared himself to a superhero. He has famously described himself as
a very stable genius
who has never made a mistake. He is not lying when he makes these outrageous claims, for Trump truly believes them to be true, just as he believes he won the 2020 election.
because this election was a fraud. Just so you understand, this election was a fraud.
At the same time, Trump is incapable of describing an inner psychological life or of identifying traces of reflection, emotional nuance, doubt, or fallibility. Even though he talks about himself all the time, Trump has never been able to explain his inner world or to narrate stories about how he has come to be the person he is, as frustrated interviewers and biographers have repeatedly noted. At the center of Trump's personality lies a narrative vacuum, the space where the self-defining life story should be but never was. As such, Trump is rarely introspective, retrospective, or prospective. There is no depth, no past, and no future. The New York Times television critic, James Paniwosa, has observed that the real Donald Trump is a television character. In trying to predict what Trump will do, Paniwosa cautioned, and I quote him, "The key is to remember that Donald Trump is not a person." What Paniwosa meant is that Trump's behavior is not driven by the strategies, motivations, and beliefs that we typically attribute to full-fledged people. If you want to gain insight into Trump, ask yourself this: what might happen next on television? What would a TV character do? Trump played himself as a TV character for 14 seasons on the...
I mean, I talk about this all the time. Trump is a celebrity. Excuse me. Trump is a celebrity. Before he even had the show, he's on Home Alone. He's the one that Kevin asked how to get somewhere at the Grand Central Station. Trump has been having TV appearances for years before he had that show. But Trump ain't the problem. It's the people voting for him that bothers me.
Apprentice. Millions of Americans came to know him through that show, establishing what the cognitive scientist Shira Gabriel and her colleagues have described as strongly emotional parasocial bonds with Trump. But even before that, going back to the 1980s, Trump honed his character to play a distinctively Trumpian protagonist in life, so much so that over time he has become a heroic character. Trump is the mighty role and nothing else. You feel it in his presence. Trump loyalist and right-wing provocateur Steve Bannon once described Trump as the Rain Man of nationalism. Bannon was referencing the 1988 movie about an autistic savant played by
No, he is not the Rain Man, because Rain Man was actually really fucking smart. This is one of my favorite fucking movies. I cannot see him commit. I could see the occult symbolism. I definitely see it, but I would not call him the Rain Man.
Dustin Hoffman. Like the Rain Man, Trump may be perceived as deficient in certain basic human aptitudes. By embracing the Trump persona wholeheartedly, Trump implicitly concedes that there are realms of human experience, some of which he may write off as weaknesses, that are completely foreign to him. These include most of the duties of parenthood and close friendships, showing sympathy for others in times of need, expressing fidelity to a cause beyond the self, and apprehending complexity and ambivalence in life.
I will say, in Trump's defense, and maybe because he's a little bit autistic, he sees the big stuff. He's like, wait, you've got Russia and China, they don't trust each other. We can't let them get together. They'll kick our ass.
Many of Trump's supporters perceive Trump the way Trump perceives himself. In their minds, he is a liminal figure, superhuman in some ways, but also lacking certain qualities that most people, for better and for worse, possess. A liminal figure who is more than a person, but less than a person too, may not be subject to the rules and contingencies that pertain to regular people. Conventional norms of rectitude and decency do not apply. In the eyes of his supporter, Trump possesses extraordinary powers that are wielded for good and against evil. Who cares if he is flawed? So what if he lacks certain distinctively human qualities? What does it matter that he is rude, authoritarian, or even a criminal? It is well recognized that a key to Trump's appeal, especially among working-class white Americans, is his ability to channel and give voice to inchoate rage, resentment, and grievance. Last spring at a rally in Waco, Texas, Trump told his loyalists,
I am your warrior. I am your justice. For those who have been wronged and betrayed, of which there are many people out there that have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. We will take care of them.
But what has often been missed about Trump rallies and about the emotional effect Trump exerts on many of his supporters more generally is the sense of enjoyment and thrill he evokes. The New York Times columnist David French is one of the few observers who has underscored the positive feelings, the folksy fun and silliness, the thrilling sense of belonging that people often experience at Trump rallies. In French's
You know
words,
why
Trump
they're entertained by
functions
that? I'm gonna jump in now. They're entertained by that because that comes into anti-intelligence. See, even it is. Yes, going back to when, yep, that's exactly what I'm saying. No, the other part, this comment right here. It goes back to intellectualism. Because an intelligent person pays attention to what someone is saying, not where they're pointing. Okay? Even in comedy, there's still intelligence in comedy. A lot of people don't understand that. People who understand the true artistry of comedy can understand and laugh at it. So there's a lot of comedy that everybody's like, not funny. No, you don't have the brain. Okay, thanks for pulling up. You don't have the brain capacity to comprehend it. That's why I love Key and Peele. They have very intellectual comedy. Saturday Night Live do too. But I don't really watch it, but they've been recycling a lot of things, but their comedy is still good. But that's somebody who understands the art of comedy, or the secrets of writing comedy. I had read a book years ago, The Secrets of Writing Comedy. It was a really good book. And let me tell you, that was like taking a college course. That was not an easy book to read. But it was what I read of it was pretty good. Let's go.
Godlike,
let me finish what I
muscular,
was saying.
super deep.
And what I'm saying is, this goes to show that these people don't want intelligence. Yes, comedians are genius, but in this case, it's not. In this, no. In this case, this is pure stupidity, and this is the stupidity of America. I think Trump came back worse than when he first was here.
Who has the magical power to make good people feel good. In his essay, Brandishing the Name, or Why is Trump So Enjoyable?, the anthropologist William Mazzarella employs the French word jouissance to convey the same Trump effect, connoting a kind of delicious enjoyment that borders on farce and shamelessness. The raw, jaded fun of knowingly cultivated outrage, the more cynical, the better. French suggests that the camaraderie and good feelings sit side by side with expressions of anger and hate, as when the crowd breaks into "Let's go Brandon," which is code for "Fuck Joe Biden." Yet even this obscene invective is often uttered in a light-hearted way, as if it were a school chant at a college football game. Mazzarella argues that jouissance often feels like a guilty pleasure, feeling good while doing something that is vaguely bad. The fun Trump invokes is of the taunting kind, a making fun of others, the enemy, while reflexively making fun of the self, too, as if to entertain, for just a moment, the possibility that I myself am not good, that I may even be deplorable, in Hillary Clinton's infamous phrase, that my enemies may be right, but then again, so what? The enemy is totally worse, so let's party and kick their ass. Authoritarian leaders make their followers feel good by repeatedly and forcefully proclaiming that the latter are good.
So it was mature to be like Joe in the hole and laugh about it. Remember that one show I showed y'all? They put Joe in the hole. What fucking sense does that make? Have you ever seen any other country do anything like that? No, only in motherfucking America.
Good people, and that their enemies are bad. The opening move of the authoritarian dynamic is the stark division between the good in-group and the bad, that is, evil, disgusting, poisonous out-group. Going back to Mussolini, authoritarian strongmen have presented themselves as liminal
Before we get to Mussolini, here's where you know they're not intelligent, because there's not ever people like, you know what? Speaking in a very like this and saying, I feel like this person would be good as our representative of this country because of this. I'm just like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but see, I think this part is good. Well, did you know that this, we can't just come together in conversation. It got to be a fight. It got to be, I'm blue, you red.
Figures endowed with special powers to protect the in-group from an evil world, often by restoring the in-group's lost greatness. In her book, Strongmen, Mussolini to the Present, historian Ruth Ben Giat notes that the common attributes of authoritarian leaders, as perceived by their adoring followers, include proof of masculine virility, and here Trump's sexual exploits work in his favor. A primal ferocity focused on winning at all costs, and the invocation of a providential mission, being an instrument of God, during a time of national crisis. As Trump doubles down on fascist rhetoric and threatens to take on the role of America's first dictator, he will continue to win support from those followers who welcome the authoritarian embrace. Trump's comment in a December Fox News town hall that he would be a dictator on day one of his next term sparked the usual brouhaha in the media, but not among his supporters. "I love it," one woman in her 50s told the Washington Post. A poll conducted in February by the University of Massachusetts Amherst found that 74% of Republican voters think it is either definitely or probably a good idea for Trump to be a dictator for a day, attempting to convince hardcore Trump supporters that their hero is a dangerous authoritarian is an exercise in futility. The journalist Amanda Mercati observes, "They know. It's why they like him." Whether Trump's enduring support will be enough to return him to the White House remains, of course, the big open question. He has never, after all, won the popular vote. During his time in office, moreover, Trump's approval ratings never reached as high as 50%. Just as he seems to enjoy everlasting appeal, there exists on the other side of the Great Divide everlasting repugnance. But this much is certain. Whatever happens, Donald Trump will continue to live on in the minds of millions of Americans as a remarkable liminal figure, the kind of personified entity around which mythologies are made, much more than a person could ever be, and much less.
I'm done. The outro is okay. Yo, in conclusion, was that comment? Americans are dumb and willfully ignorant. There we go. That's the conclusion of the show. Dumb, you see that blank fucking screen? That's America. Dumb and willfully ignorant. This election has made me look at the divester sideways. I'm not really surprised that they voted. It's not, see, this is the problem with people not understanding. Nobody really cares so much of who you voted for. It's what comes out your mouth after. It's what comes out your mouth after. Or before that, while you're voting for that person. Oh, please. Someone said women are at risk of dying early if they don't have enough sex. As scientists pinpoint optimum month. This just came across my email. Hold on, y'all. Optimum monthly book rate. Bird gets on it. The bees get on it. Women at risk of dying early if they don't have enough sex. As scientists, okay. The bees get on it, and now it appears that women who have lived for... Get the fuck out of here. Get out my inbox with this fuck shit. That means women are not having... Oh, to get the fuck out of here. I'm not even entertaining that. So, the thing is... The thing is this. I keep talking in the microphone. That's it. That sums up the show. It's what came out of people's mouth. It's the hate that came out of people's mouth before Trump won and after he won. It's the things that they were saying that made absolutely no fucking sense. It's the fact that people express their true self. Something about Trump brings out everybody's true self. I saw it at work. I literally saw this particular maintenance man at my job. When it was close to that election, I kind of already saw what he was. You understand? But I noticed that when Trump had won, them motherfuckers was nowhere to be found. When I say they disappeared, they disappeared. They were not sitting outside no more. You couldn't find them around no more. I was like, oh. Even got as far as throwing one of the black ladies under the bus at the damn job. After Trump became the president. And I was like, ooh. This is what Trump do. And my thing is to behave like that because somebody is your president is absolutely diabolical and stupid. I can't even call it diabolical. That's just stupid. Because there's going to be another fucking president. You act like this motherfucker going to be your president until you drop the casket. Maybe they will. But my point is, what point does it... Listen, I'm done. Thank you all for listening to the show. I'm out of here.